Welcome to Human Rights Education Now, a podcast series from Human Rights Educators USA. I'm your host, Bill Fernekes, a member of the National Steering Committee of HRE USA, a collaborative network to learn, teach, organize, advocate, and innovate for human rights education in the United States. This podcast aims to raise awareness about human rights education and invites listeners to engage with the worldwide movement to make human rights education a core focus of educational programs from preschool through higher education and in both non-formal and informal community educational settings. Today I am joined as moderator by Ava Join Kreutziger, a student at Columbia University and an intern with Human Rights Educators USA. Today's program concludes our conversation with Feliece, professor on the Faculty of Behavioral and Social Sciences at Philippine Normal University and a longtime human rights educator and scholar. In this episode, Feliece discusses strategies for overcoming fragmentation in the social sciences to develop an integrated framework for addressing human rights education concerns, how to reconceptualize oppressors of human rights as victims of a dehumanizing system, how Asian societies today are addressing human rights education in an era of growing authoritarianism, the importance of educating institutions of the mass media regarding human rights, individuals who have inspired her work in HRE, key quotes that epitomize her approach to human rights education, and recommended strategies for advancing human rights education in the Philippines and elsewhere.
And to build on that, you speak about overcoming fragmentation in the social sciences and embracing rights-based development as an integrative framework. In your practice, how have you successfully brought together disciplines like ecology, economics, and culture and human rights education? And could you share an example with us?
Well, in my university, we do integration of research, instruction, and extension. And so I did a research on the history of indigenous tribe that's vanishing in the sense that their young generation no longer know their culture, their language, and all that. And so in my research, the purpose was to document what remains of their culture, and in doing so, we partnered with the elders. And because most of the elders didn't know how to read and write, but they tell stories, right? And so my students were there, and we also invited their young generation who know how to read and write, and together we documented their culture. And from there, that's research and instruction, because from the point of view of the mainstream university students, it's something that is new to them. It's something that they now realize where the indigenous people are coming from, because they have learned amnesia. Colonialism has inflicted upon us collective amnesia, social amnesia, right? They no books, no stories about their tribe, and it's replaced with the stories from the point of view of the colonizers. And so the only way to get out of the collective amnesia is to rediscover their own story, their own narrative. That's how they can get out of the amnesia. So they started to take pride in how they see their ancestral domain, their culture, and their language, and all that. To them, we discovered that that the classroom is the ancestral domain. Knowledge is the culture that they have. And the teachers are the elders. So in formal setting, you have the classroom, you have the curriculum, you have, the curriculum and the teachers, right? But in indigenous areas, there is no divide between this is education and this is their everyday life. To them, it's what life is. So that's indigenous education. They have their own knowledge system. They see the world from their own culture. But in the formal setting, you divide these things according to fields of specialization. Like you have, you call it sociology, anthropology, political science, or economics, right? But in their in the ancestral domain, they don't talk of these things. It's like it's culture, it's their way of life, it's the tradition, those things. So there's no it's holistic in a way. Okay, it's holistic, but in the formal setting it's not. So our students being exposed to that, they see that indigenous knowledge system is one way of seeing the world, seeing ecology, seeing economics, you know, seeing sociology rolled into one.
Um, and then here's a quote which stood out when reading your work. And can you elaborate on its meaning for human rights education? Training the police allowed me to peep into the worldview of the oppressors. Unless we look at them as victims themselves of what Freire calls as dehumanizing situation, we will never be able to fully understand the indignity of human rights violations. So you already touched upon this in your previous answer, but just in terms of looking at it from a more bird's eye point of view for the meaning of human rights education, I'd love to hear you elaborate on that.
Human rights violation is not personal, it's systemic. You become an abuser, you become a violator because you have been prepared to be such. So in the case of the police, at least at the time that I did the training for the police, that's the period that I'm discussing these things, the system prepared them to be violators. So once you see that, you stop looking at human rights from an ideological point of view. You connect people wherever they are. Human rights should be the common frame, whether you're man or woman, you're a police or a civilian. Because if you start with acknowledging that respect and dignity in the human person, because we all wear different identities, right? We all wear different identities. But it's human rights is a reminder that beyond all these layers of identities, whether as a police or a military or civilian, is human rights. And so when I saw them as also victims of the very system that raised them, you start looking at the work as, let's change the system then. You don't take it as personal to the police. And then they become more, you cannot give peace unless you have peace, right? You experience peace. You cannot give love unless you experience love. How can we expect them to respect human rights if they don't know how it's like to feel respected, that their own rights are respected? So we have to start with that. So it's an exciting but difficult work, but to me it really is the system, the culture that we have to change.
Felicia, you've done a lot of work in the Philippines, but also throughout Asia. So I'm going to ask you to broaden the lens a little bit. What progress have you seen in advancing human rights education in Asia, and what are some of the ongoing challenges that you view when you look beyond the Philippines itself?
It's like a roller coaster ride. There was a point where human rights in Southeast Asia, at least, is something, it is gaining ground. Okay, there was a point. Even in the Philippines, it's like, wow, we have a human rights culture until Duterte came. So, but the, human rights responds to the socioeconomic political condition of Asia. We do have some wins, like it's in the school. We have Commission on Human Rights in most countries in Southeast Asia. And then we have a strong, in Southeast Asia or in Asia, we have a strong civil society movement and all that. Until you vote for leaders. We vote for leaders who bring us back to the dark ages, right? So it's a constant, it's a dialectic in a way. It's a constant building of this culture. It should never stop. I must confess, when I'm going back to the Philippines, okay, when former President Benigno Aquino became president, that was in 2010 until 2016, we became complacent because we had the president who was known to be a human rights advocate. There was no funding on human rights education, so we did not do human rights education. We did all other things until Duterte came. When Duterte came, it's like our human rights moral vocabulary got depleted. We, people were questioning what human rights are. We thought we did have a strong human rights culture. And then it's like uh, a, a, a batch of leaders in Asia. It's like contagious, and they infected each other. They infected each other. And so as human rights educators and as human rights advocates, we had to deal with creeping authoritarianism, and then with identity politics. Like, we had to deal with religion in Asia, religious conflict, gender issues in Asia is a big thing. Okay, so unlike in the maybe 90s and early 2000, it was the human rights education was so defined. You deal with the state. Okay, you deal with the state. But now you deal not only with the state, but communities, with organizations, with embracing different points of view. It's like left wing or right wing. So now it's more complicated than just dealing with the state. It's like dealing with a frame of mind. We have to deal with a frame of mind that is dominating discourse. Maybe it's because of the digital age, where it gave birth to post-truth period, where everyone has an opinion. And well, it's good, like, right? Everyone has a voice, but facts become questionable. And even in the midst of facts, people refuse to see because of that frame of mind. I don't know what kind of what, what kind of disease is that. So we are dealing with that in Asia and the world, right? So I do not pretend that I fully understand what's going on in the world, but there really is a problem with how we see things. There's like a mental model or a frame of mind that we have to deal with, and we just forgot to listen to each other. In Asia, that's happening. No, I don't know if I'm making sense, but
You are, because I think it really talks to a more global phenomenon. But I want to pursue one thing about that. You mentioned that there was this sort of swinging back and forth, yet there are institutions that remain, correct? The public schools, the government, the state, journalism. And I'm wondering what your opinion is of how human rights education could impact things like the media, because they have a huge influence on public opinion to some degree. Do you believe that human rights education has sort of failed in educating the media itself?
Uh, yes and no. When we speak of media now in the Philippines, we don't know the media anymore. Who the media is? You have influencers, right? You have influencers who are like troll farms, who are spewing things that don't have any basis, but people listen to them. So how do we deal with them? So I think we got taken by surprise by how social media and digital tools would impact the work that we do, and we were not able to respond proactively. So I think that's the problem. We got stuck with, okay, this is the curriculum, we teach this and all that. But on the other hand, there are echo chambers, influencers, the algorithm in YouTube, in TikTok, and in Facebook. We have not dealt with those. So we kind of so late, delayed, and reactive. Those who are in human rights education, I must confess, I'm guilty, and so that's a problem. We have to deal with that. See, when there was a time that we thought that human rights education or human rights culture is taking roots, so we became complacent. As we became complacent, the influencers are creeping little by little into the house, into the gadgets of many people. So we were not able to react right away. And so now we have a problem.
But
Now we
isn't
have a
that to some degree also a responsibility of large tech companies because they're the ones that set up the superstructure? And where would
Yeah.
human rights education have a role there? Because those are the people that and their infrastructure that are creating the possibility of this, are they not?
That's why I said that in the 90s and early 2000, our the violator is defined, state actors. Now it's not anymore. I mean, it's not just them. We have to deal with tech companies, although non-state. Okay, tech companies. But looking at it from a third world country, we are consumers. Where are they located? They are not located in the Philippines. So how can we influence them?
Good
So
question.
we cannot. So I don't know. We have to strategize, but I don't know if we're ready. But that's so we in human rights education now we discuss disinformation and misinformation as part of human rights education work and talk about AI. Another thing is AI, right? So those things. So we have to also and big data as well, data analytics. We have to acquire these things and see how they are in the scheme of things when we reinvent human rights education in the age of the digital age and in the age of AI.
I think those are very important insights because that topic really has not been brought to the fore enough. So let me turn to our last three questions. These questions we ask of every person who's on the podcast. So let me ask you this one first. Who would you see as the most influential role model for your human rights education work, either still alive today or someone who has passed on?
Of course, it's Gramsci and Freire. Until now, I owe my thinking to them. But on the side of really actual work, I give I give my I doff my hats off to the mass movements in the Philippines, both the Makabayan Bloc and the Akbayan Bloc. During the time of Duterte and his war on drugs, it's this a mass movement that really pushed back really hard at the expense of their lives. And so I am forever grateful to them. And many were co-opted by many of the human rights activists were co-opted by the Duterte administration. They were like justifying the war on drugs and the things that the administration pursued. But the Akbayan Bloc and the Makabayan, the left movement in the country, they really pushed back. I am grateful to them. I truly appreciate what they did during those 6 dark years of the Duterte administration. Now I can speak, right? I can speak. Imagine even on Facebook at that time, you can really sense that people were, how would I say, safe. They try to be safe in their posts and all that. In fairness to the current administration, we don't feel that. We don't feel that. No, it's an improvement, but there is a lot of work to be done. So those on the theoretical side, I truly appreciate Gramsci and Paulo Freire. They continue to guide me. But on the practice side, I appreciate Makabayan Bloc and the Akbayan Bloc, the left movement in the country.
So, moving on, what quote most effectively sums up your view of the importance of human rights?
You know, when I did human rights education work in the communities in the country, there is one definition that really struck me, and I still remember it up to this day. That human rights is rice. Human rights is rice. What is human rights to the ordinary Filipino? It is rice, and it's a metaphor for, a day-to-day life, day-to-day battle for dignity, day-to-day battle for food, day-to-day battle for security, day-to-day battle for freedom. So, because sometimes when you do human rights education work, we get to be stuck with the conventions and the heavy discourse that is in this field. But when you do human rights education work in the community, it's like it really is about their lived experiences. And that's how I anchor my work, the lived experiences of people who suffer the most, who are marginalized by the kind of system that we have.
And so, if you had the power to make one critical change to advance human rights education in the Philippines today, what would you recommend?
Because I'm now into institution building. Okay, I have sometimes I'm past the street the street parliamentarian work. And there are times that I would still go out, but as you mature in doing this kind of work, I see that there is a need to build institutions in support, embedding, not only in support of, but embedding human rights principles. So my university is a teacher education university. So I would like, and I teach in a public university. It's government funded. Okay, it's government funded. And in the world today, universities are expected to internationalize, to participate in world ranking. Okay, educators, academics are expected to publish, do more, right? To be competitive and all that. But there is no metric on human rights. No metric on human rights. And so if there is something that I would want is to embed human rights metric in the way universities operate, in the way schools, basic education and higher education operate. Because I think there we have to, we don't always have to fight for human rights. We can incentivize it. We can incentivize human rights. How? Put it in the system. Put it as part of the quality standard that universities and schools will have to meet. And they will, faculty members, teachers will meet those. Education leaders will meet those. So to me, that's from an institution building point of view.
So in a sense, you want to change the reward system.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting issue because in the United States today, there is, of course, looming over every university the threat of losing accreditation by influence from the central government in Washington. And I think not enough pushback has been occurring on that because they're afraid of losing funding. But like you said, there needs to be an alternative set of metrics that allows them to be rewarded in other ways. And that also affects the actual work experiences of the people in higher education. So I think it's an important
development. Bill, sustainable development goals, they are incorporating those in the university metric system. Why not human rights?
Mm-hmm. It's a great idea.
With
the United Nations, they can push that because they pushed SDGs to be part of the university metric system. So why not human rights? Yeah, sorry, Ava.
Oh, no, you're all good. I just had a follow-up question on what you were saying about using human rights education as like a framework in all institutions. How do you balance that and pushing for making sure we have this framework and curriculum in our education spaces while also balancing individualizing it and not having this standardized curriculum, which is often a big source of oppression from state governments and institutions?
In the metric system of universities, they don't do standardized curriculum. It really is dependent on the internal system of the university. So academic freedom is one metric. And so there is no risk because infusing the metric system with human rights does not mean standardization. In fact, I am against any standardization of the curriculum. Okay, because like I said, the Philippines has more than 7,000 islands. So how can you standardize everything? So that's it. So what I want is how do we transition or transform the system to be more rights-based? And we can incentivize the metric system so that universities will transition the way they do their thing, the way they operate with certain human rights metrics. That's all I'm advocating for.
Well, Felice, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank Ava for being our co-host today. And we'll be in touch very soon with the information about the follow-up. But once again, you're a great leader in human rights education. It's been a great pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you very much, Bill, Christy, Ava. And this has been more my pleasure for
such an honor.
Opportunity to share with you. When you are already like been doing this, and I'm about to retire, by the way, but next year I will retire from the university. It's like there's a need to synthesize your life's work, and this is an opportunity for me to really think about what did I do anyway? So thank you very much for giving me that opportunity.
As an aspiring human rights education leader, your ability to synthesize your work has been such an honor for me to listen to. So it's been so lovely talking to you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Human Rights Education Now. You can find additional information about this podcast series at www.hreusa.org. Each episode is available on the HRE USA podcast page, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Pocket Casts, Player FM, and Deezer. You can also download each episode as an MP3 file. If you have questions or comments about this podcast, send them to Christy at hreusa.org. That's KRISTI at hreusa.org. Our podcast team includes producer and editor Bill Fernekes, executive producer Christy Redelius-Palmer, editor Elizabeth Schwab, sound designer and project manager Sabrina Sanchez, communications and public outreach coordinator Tia Hins, and production coordinator Jasmine Chizu-Gota. Human Rights Education Now is a production of Human Rights Educators USA, a project of the Center for Transformative Action in Ithaca, New York.